Welcome to the Crafty Mini. So last week I did the Polymer video, and the idea is this week on a larger scale miniature I'm going to show you that process in a bit more detail. So we're going to skip the start of it where I've blocked out all the colours on this miniature, and we're going to go in, add the wash, and then I'm going to show you the highlighting section that I do on 28mm scale normally. I'm just doing it on this larger miniature just so you can see it a bit more clearly. That's the idea behind the video. For 28mm scale, unless it's a display piece or something that I really want to spend a lot of time with, this is the process I use because I find it makes everything pop. It makes things stand out a bit more. You get a nice contrast, and on that scale of miniature as well, it just, for me, it's my go-to sort of method. It also means I can paint really quickly as well and get whether it's like a warband or an army, painted pretty quick. So the idea is you block out your colours on your miniature and then you hit it with a wash. Now the wash I personally use is a mix of Seraphim Sepia and Agrax Earthshade with a little bit of Nuln Oil just to darken it down. It's a very heavy wash and it does stain a lot, so it does dull down those colours a little bit. I tend to paint a bit more muted for a lot of stuff unless it's a specific type of miniature. But I find it works really nice with the contrast because the base coats tend to be a bit brighter than normal. When we add them again on top of this as that first highlight, it just makes everything stand out a bit more. So the idea of this video, we're going to show this whole process off from start to finish on this larger scale mini, as I've said, and you should hopefully see how it actually goes about and how I get that finish on my 28mm scale miniatures. Right, so you can see here that wash has fully dried. It has stained everything very heavily, which is what I want. It's going to get into all the little bits of detail, anything that's like the folds of the fabric and things on the actual sculpt, whatever the miniature is that you're doing. And this is going to help now with when we start doing our highlighting layers. So start wherever you want on the miniature. This particular one I'm going to start with the leather coat, and I'm basically going in back with my original base coat, so there's no highlighting colours or anything like that. And all I'm doing is I'm going to take my time and go around and pick out all of these little folds, anything that's upward facing, just to start to highlight it up. We'll do additional highlight layers afterwards as well, but for this first step, this is all I'm doing. And obviously imagine this is normally on a 28mm scale miniature, so it can be a bit more finicky, but it's a case of just taking your time. Don't rush the process and just work your way through colour by colour. If you do make mistakes, the nice thing is with this particular method is you can just hit it with a wash again to dull it down and go again. If you go over another colour, you just obviously neaten it up. Let's say if I go over the trousers on this one, I'll neaten it up with the green, wash it again, and then go back in and start again with the first highlight layer. So just working my way around, picking out all these little raised details. With this video, I'll let the footage run a bit longer than I normally would, because the Lord of the Rings ones have been a bit shorter form. That's just because I'm quickly showing all the little bits that I'm doing for each individual mini. With this, you can see like my brush control. There's bits where I'm scratching on. I'm putting quite thick layers on some of the higher folds and bits like that, just to pick out all these details. The first few times you do the paint on, it may not necessarily show particularly well, but it works in the more and more of those layers that you add on top. It builds up that opacity, so just stick with it and trust the process. Right, so the first layer on the coat's done, and at this point you can't really see the contrast because everything else is dulled down. So now I'm going to go in and work on the green. So we've got the trousers, which on this sculpt's got some really nice folds on it, and like I mentioned with the Lord of the Rings miniatures that I'm doing, the way the sculpt is on those as well. There's these really quite intricate folds and the big beards and things, so you can take your time and pick out those sort of details, even on something as small as 28mm scale. But yeah, just going through anything that's upward facing that would have more of a light, the little folds, picking them through again and just taking my time. Now with the wash, there's a slight glossy effect that's on there, and that can sometimes, that'll affect us as you're looking at it and painting on, like you know, the contrast doesn't really show until you've done 2 or 3 colours or 2 or 3 areas of the miniature that are really apparent, and you've picked them out, and then it suddenly starts to come together. So it's one of those, it's a case of trusting the process. And you'll see here, once the green's done, this starts to work more, because you'll see more of the definition on the coat as well that we've done in the first step. Right, so again, repeating the process. We're working on the lighter browns for this sort of backpack that this character is carrying. This particular miniature, the only reason I've sort of grabbed it is it's been sitting in my collection for a while and I've done nothing with them. They're part of a 54mm scale zombie apocalypse series. I've changed this kit basket slightly. The backpack he's got, it should actually be a trolley that he's sort of pulling alongside him. But I've just put it on his back to just give it a bit more visual interest and a more interesting silhouette. You can see here I'm not being as neat as I am with the trousers, because they've got more defined folds, so I'm being a bit scratchy, just adding little bits here and there, so little bits of edging, and it just gives a bit more visual interest when you're looking at the miniature. I'm not one for edge highlighting up to the kazoo and making everything the perfect blend and sharpness across the whole model. I'd rather have the miniature look a bit more sort of worn in, and just so it tells a story a little bit more, but each to their own with that. The process is exactly the same, so you're working your way through on that colour and picking out little details. So for the actual skin now, so it's the same process I'd do on a 28mm scale. The difference being with this larger scale miniature, I don't have to be as fine with my actual paintwork, because I've got a bit more area to move the paintbrush about, but it's the same process. So I hit on any human face anyway, it'll be the nose and the bridge, the cheekbones in particular, the forehead if that's prominent, and then pick out either the bottom lip if they're bearded like this fellow, or both of the lips out, pick them out with the skin tone colour, and all those dark recesses like the sunken eyes, the eye sockets themselves, the gels where it meets either the beard or just on the face in general, still stays with that initial wash down colour, and again it just builds up that contrast. Now, as I say, on this miniature, because it's larger scale, it'll be a bit more apparent, and it might not look as neat, but on a 28mm scale, when you're painting like this, it's enough for it to show a lot of visual interest with the face, and giving you just making it look a bit more like there's a bit more detail there than there might actually be on the sculpt itself. So just pick out cheekbones, nose, the bridge of the nose and the forehead if needs be, and then just a lip, and it's enough visual interest there. Now with this one, you'll notice that the beard was stained quite heavily by the wash, but that's okay. So because I want this miniature to be a bit more grimy, because of it's the whole post-apocalyptic sort of theme that's running through it. I'm going in there with the original white and just picking out the grey areas. We'll patch this up a little bit with some darker grey, as if like it's the actual edges of the beard that are whiter, so he looks like he's an older man. Same with little flecks in the actual hair that's under the hood, which you can't quite see at this point, but we'll pick those out, and just again, it's all about building up contrast and visual interest. With the scale, this miniature with the scale it is, I will pick out the eyebrows as well, but on a 28mm I don't normally, unless it's the Lord of the Rings stuff that I've been uploading recently, because they have got really prominent eyebrows. And the same goes for eyeballs themselves. If I feel like I can't get a nice neat paint job on there, on a 28mm scale I won't bother. I'll just let the wash do the talking and just dot the eyes for the pupil, and that's it. Right, so at this point everything on the miniature has been highlighted with its original base colour. Done. Now for, again, 28mm scale, that's pretty much all you need to do. You can spend a little bit more time if you want on certain areas, and that's what I'm going to show now. So all I'm doing is I've added a little bit of a lighter base colour into that each of the original colours, just to build up some more highlights. So for this leather coat, because I want it to feel a bit more worn and weathered, you can see I'm doing very scratchy highlights and just picking up raised areas. There's very little to no paint actually on the brush, and it's just hitting the raised areas, and again it builds up visual interest. Really good for 28mm scale cloaks and capes and things. Really adds something nice. And again, it depends on the theme and the style of the miniature. You can do things like this where I'm doing on the bottom of the coat here, just dabbing and scratching away, and this, you get like pockets of highlight on there, and it just gives variation to the actual fabric itself. And for things like leather, it's a really nice way of just again building up more contrast with that slightly lighter highlight. So after the wash, you've done the first highlight. You may have done the extra highlight if you want. Now this is an extra step I sometimes do on 28mm scale for display purposes. I get the same wash, heavily watered down. We're talking sort of 5-to-1 in favour of water, and I just give a unifying wash over everything, just to dull it down a little bit. And again, just to build up, it settles in those recesses and just makes those creases and things a little bit darker. It looks quite heavy as it's going on because it's obviously wetting the dry paint, but it's not as heavy as the initial wash, nowhere near as much, and it's just enough just to give a bit more visual interest, bit more contrast. The only difference is for the skin, I'll do a thin down Reikland Flesh Shade or something similar rather than this wash, because I don't want to tint the beard and the skin tone too much. But again, it just unifies all those scratchy highlights and those couple of layers of different highlighted colour, just brings it all together and just makes it feel a bit more unified in the finished piece. Right, this final step, now this may not show particularly well on the footage, but when you see the final piece it should become more apparent. And again, this is something I do on all of my 28mm scales, regardless if I've done the extra highlight layer or not. So even if I've just done a base coats washed and then base coats again for that highlight, I'll always do this step, and this is varnishing. One, protects the miniature. Two though, then the more important one is it just ties in all those different materials that are on the miniature together. And again, this is all about different contrast and the way the colours react differently with light and things. So anything fabric always gets a matte varnish, skin gets a satin, and then if there's anything in particular that I want showing a bit more wet, then I'll use a gloss varnish, and this just gets put on all over. As I say, you can't really tell with this because obviously the varnish is there's no pigment in there, but when you see the finished product, it just knocks the shine off those wash layers that we've put on, and just unifies everything, because you'll have like areas where the deep recesses on the trousers are a bit shiny because of the wash, and then the highlights are a bit more matte because of the finish of the actual pigment in the paint, and just brings it all together. And here it is finished. So as I say, the this particular paint, because it's a larger scale, it may not show off as much detail as I'd want, but the idea is just showing you that process for a 28mm scale to get as maximum detail and colour contrast as possible without having to do a lot of work, to be honest with you, because the idea is you base colour, you wash with a very heavy wash, and then you base colour again for that first highlight, and then if you want to do an additional highlight you add a bit more. But hopefully you can see here in the stills that you've got the different contrasts, the way the light's affecting it, picking up the different fabrics, the very matte for like sort of the coat in particular, knocking the shine off the creases of the trousers in particular. It makes it pop a little bit more. You can see the folds on the actual on all like the bits of fabric, and they're all giving off different contrasts of highlight. But yeah, hopefully this has helped people. I think washes get a bad rap a lot of the time, and I'm not sure why. They're a good tool to use, and again for 28mm scale, if you want to get an army or a warband or whatever it might be, bashed out really quick, this is a really simple method, and it gives a lot of visual interest to the actual miniature. But thank you very much for watching, and we hopefully see you on the next one. Cheers.